Chapter 14 Convection. Eli loved October. When he was little, it was for the abundance of candy. Halloween was Catherine's favorite holiday, and they would schedule a weekend of watching gory horror movies. His sister liked the older horror films that crossed the line from scary to silly. Volunteering for pumpkin carving for the old Jack-o'-lantern fest was a wild family tradition that started when he was in middle school and Catherine dragged him there. They went every year since no matter what. An earthquake could split New Welch in two and Eli would still be expected to arrive on time. That Friday he went to their meeting spot. It was a cafe near the event. Catherine was on what was probably her fourth cup of coffee that day. His sister had a habit of substituting meals with caffeine and croissants. He took the seat across from her at the nook in the corner, away from other people as she liked. "Hey sis," he greeted her. "Were you waiting long?" She looked at her watch and replied, "About 3.5 minutes. 10 seconds earlier than usual. What's gotten into you?" He was about to quit back when Tadashi rushed into the cafe. Eli held back a groan. Tadashi tried to tag along when he found out where Eli was headed despite Eli's protests. His roommate really wanted to go to the pumpkin fest. Eli tried to melt into his seat but it was too late. Tadashi found them. Tadashi smiled boyishly. "You must be Catherine. I'm Eli's friend." Catherine nodded. "Tadashi, right? The one and only." Tadashi took the seat beside Eli and said, "I haven't carved a pumpkin since I was a kid. I'm so excited." Eli looked apologetically at his sister. "I tried to lose him. I swear." Tadashi chimed. "Not fast enough, mi compadre. You can't outrun me. I was descended from ninjas." "No, you weren't." "I could be." Eli sighed, wishing there was a large pumpkin he could bludgeon himself with. Put him out of his misery. Catherine was almost nice and patiently dealt with Tadashi like he was a toddler she was babysitting. Tadashi took forever to choose a pumpkin. They were too small, too big, too green, or too orange. Eli opted to leave him and go on to carving his pumpkin. Catherine brought knives from her collection and loaned him one to use. Catherine made the same pumpkin carving every year. She carved a cat. Eli used to tease her about it, but it didn't stop his sister from carving her pumpkin cats. He grew to appreciate constance in life as he got older. Like Catherine and her cat obsession. "What are you carving?" she asked as she drew her outline with a Sharpie. "Another hero again?" He frowned. "No." He planned to carve Electric, but that might raise suspicion. It might also be too egotistical. He used to carve a different hero every year from Commander Valor to Savior. He carved Valiant last year. He had no idea he would end up meeting, let alone working with them someday. Life was strange. Wanting to stall from his carving problem, he went back to Tadashi, who was choosing between two identical pumpkins. "They look so different," Tadashi said. "I'm so conflicted." Eli grabbed one and handed it to Tadashi. "There. Now start carving." "But," a female voice called out, "Eli." It was Emo. She was wearing a red knitted hat and her cheeks were rosy from the cold. She looked so pretty it almost hurt to look at her. "Hey," he replied. She pulled him into a hug and Eli tried not to melt. "I feel like I haven't seen you in years." He had been avoiding her for nearly 2 weeks ever since he found out about Blaze being Sunspark. All the secrets made it hard to be around her. And he just felt awkward, knowing she was with someone he despised. There wasn't anything he could do to change it. She pulled Tadashi in a sideways hug due to the pumpkin being in the way. "Nice to see you could make it this year, Dash." "This year?" Tadashi repeated. "What do you mean?" "We went last year. Eli said you couldn't go because you were sick." Tadashi looked at his best friend, shocked and betrayed. "You took her last year? You went without me. How could you?" Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "Well." Tadashi hugged his pumpkin tighter. "I see how it is. I'm not a doe-eyed brunette, so I'm left at home with an imaginary illness while you take Mo around the city to all the cool places." "Tadashi. I know my lot in life. Excuse me while I carve my pumpkin and try not to weep from your casual betrayal." Tadashi slumped away to where Catherine was carving her pumpkin. Wanting to move past the awkward scene, he asked, "You got a pumpkin yet?" Mo shook her head. Eli offered her the other pumpkin Tadashi had been debating over earlier. She smiled gratefully and took it. Not wanting to leave her yet, he inquired, "Are you here alone?" "I was supposed to go with Blaze, but he just called and said he had a family emergency." Eli had a feeling what that family emergency was. She added, "I asked Jenny to come but she said no, so I'm all alone." "You can hang with us," he offered. "As long as you don't mind Tadashi spending 3 days on carving his pumpkin."
Montagsfrühet,
smiling. We'll bring him food and water, and force him to take breaks. In the end, Eli carved a jack-o'-lantern of chromium. His mentor might get a kick out of it. Tadashi carved a startlingly accurate carving of Lily Choi's face. Catherine's cat pumpkin was adorable, and Emo surprised him when she carved electric. Why electric? He asked. He saved me from the arena. He's kind of my hero, she admitted. Second favorite, actually. Silver Jaguar will always be number one to me. As they lit up the jack-o'-lanterns and Eli stared at the carved pumpkin of his alter ego, he couldn't help but smile. Something dangerously like hope was lit in him. Chapter 15 Malleability. Catherine took them out to dinner after the pumpkin fest. There was a diner near her apartment that had been Eli's main source of nourishment from the ages of 10 to 18. Catherine couldn't cook, and not for a lack of trying. Anything more complicated than toast or cereal was bound to land someone in the hospital. Catherine delighted his friends by telling them his embarrassing childhood stories. It took all of his willpower to keep his sister from summoning the photo albums from the apartment to further cement his humiliation. After dinner, he said goodbye to his friends before they had to run and catch the last train back to City. He went back to the apartment he called home and helped Catherine set everything up for their horror movie marathon. As they sat on the couch and watched campers being murdered by a serial killer, Catherine commented, "Emo is cute." He eyed warily. "She is. And you haven't made a move, why?" "Maybe we're just friends." In response, Catherine threw popcorn at his face. He wiped salt from his face and glared at her. "And it doesn't matter. She has a boyfriend now. This is what happens when you have zero game. Didn't Alex teach you how to talk to girls? Emo isn't just some girl. She's special." Catherine scrunched up her nose and cooed him. How cute. Little Eli's in love." He slapped her hands away from trying to tickle his neck. "Stop it." She rolled her brown eyes and smacked him in the arm. "Tell her how you feel. Get it over with." "Need I repeat? She has a boyfriend." That was a supervillain that blackmailed him into silence. He really hated Blaze freaking Heart. "How long have they been dating?" Catherine asked. "A few weeks." "That's nothing," she scoffed. "They'll probably be over in a month or two." "What if they don't? What if they stay together forever?" Eli could imagine them getting married and giving birth to a brood of fire-breathing architects. They'd be smart, pretty, and have some serious anger issues. If they had any of Mo in them, they would be very efficient at breaking the law. And leave no messes. "You know, little brother, you are the dumbest smart person I know," Catherine told him. "I raised you since you were 10, and I didn't teach you to be a quitter." Catherine had been the only parent in his life ever since their mother passed away. He was 10 and she was 18. She managed to juggle college, a job, and raising him. In comparison to what she went through, he looks soft like a butter roll. "What if she doesn't feel the same way I do?" he asked. "Then at least you tried instead of living your life with regrets." "You never have any regrets about your life, Cat?" "Oh, Ido." She laughed. "But I would rather regret the things I did, and not the things I didn't do." He wished he could be as fearless as her. He played the part of being brave, fighting bad guys and flying into burning buildings. He did it all with his face covered. Without his suit, he was just the same old Eli, and doubt made him stop. There was more he wanted to tell her. About Electric, about being a hero, and about the fact that Mo's boyfriend had fire powers, but he couldn't. Instead, he ate popcorn and watched disgusting horror movies with her for the rest of the night. After Blaze missed the pumpkin fest, he promised to make it up to Mo. Blaze went to her dorm that Saturday morning with a large white box. He placed it on her bed and urged her to open it. Inside was a red ball gown. She pulled it out of the box and hugged it to her, imagining what she would look inside the gown. "Very pretty, but what's the occasion?" "My parents throw a Halloween masquerade ball every year," he explained. "And I was hoping you'd be my date." She laughed in disbelief. "Who are you? Who has masquerade balls anymore?" "I know it sounds pretentious, and I'm usually bored out of my mind during these parties, but I thought this year I had a girlfriend, so it wouldn't be so bad." She stilled. "Girlfriend?" He looked unsure. He cleared his throat nervously. "Unless you'd rather not be my girlfriend? We can keep it casual." "No. I mean, yes." She laughed at how silly she sounded. "I mean, I would love to be your girlfriend." "Good, 'cause I was dead set on being your boyfriend." He took the gown from her and gently placed it on the bed. He pulled her into his arms and dipped down. He was a very good kisser. Blaze was always warm, like he spent hours under the sun before he saw her. He pulled away but didn't let her go. "Party is at 9. My dad is sending a town car to pick us up. Is there any masquerade etiquette I should know about? Keep the mask on. Don't accept any drinks from anyone except me. Sounds ominous. He snorted. It's really not. We'll stay the required amount of time to make my parents happy, and then we can leave and go somewhere actually fun. And where is that exactly? It's off list. She sighed. By now she was used to constant need to surprise her. He seemed to always manage it. Blaze's heart was not predictable by any stretch of the imagination. It made dating him thrilling and slightly worrying. I'll pick you up at 7. The venue is going to be a 2-hour ride from here, Blaze told her. For once I'm looking forward to a ball. I've never been to one, she admitted. There were no balls where she was from. She was from a coastal town. People got married at the beach with no shoes on. Ball gowns and masks were worlds away from Bay Valley. I'll have to make it a magical night, Cinderella, Blaze promised before giving her another kiss. We can't let that dress go to Chapter 16, Exponent. Mr. Carlyle called Eli that Saturday morning and asked him to come over. Eli had only seen Carlyle Manor in photos and never thought he would be able to go inside. It was situated outside the city and bordered New Carist. It was an impressively large structure, aged and still standing through generations of the Carlyle family. He landed by the back door of the kitchen as Mr. Carlyle instructed. He changed out of his suit and knocked on the door. An elderly man let him in and directed him to Mr. Carlyle's study. He passed through the tastefully decorated hallways that even had a suit of armor. Emma would have loved it. She loved old buildings and the history that came with them. She studied the materials used to create them and the workmanship. Eli could picture her running through Carlyle Manor and studying it to her heart's content. Mr. Carlyle was typing away on his computer when Eli entered the study. He looked up and stopped what he was doing. Eli, he said. It's great you could make it. Eli had to give an excuse to Catherine about needing to work on something for midterms. He had been hoping to have a weekend to himself, but alas. You said it was urgent, Eli told him. What's going on? Mr. Carlyle reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a black envelope. He offered it to Eli. I got a new mission for you. Eli took the envelope and opened the flap. He pulled out the card inside and read, Annual Masquerade Ball. He didn't bother trying to hide his confusion. He asked, What is this? It's an invitation for a party, Mr. Carlyle explained. I have it on good authority that it's a cover for a secret meeting of the Brotherhood of the Stone. Who are they? You know about the Old Guard, right? First superheroes, precursor to the Heroic League. The villains have their equivalent, the Brotherhood. I've never heard of them before. He would have heard of them by now if they were as important to the VA. They're not affiliated with the Villain Alliance. The Brotherhood's more a culty boys club than organized crime. Mr. Carlyle continued. I've heard they're elitist snobs that won't just let anybody join. They like to meet up once a year and compare evil deeds against humanity. Eli held up the invitation. And you want to go and check them out? I would love to go and listen in on their psychotic checklist of how to destroy the world, but I'm too high profile, Mr. Carroll replied. Plus, my father went to school with the suspected leader back in the day, and our families have despised each other since. I won't be let through the door. Eli's brown eyes widened as he realized where this was going. You want me to go and spy on the Brotherhood? Mr. Carlyle nodded. I would have sent in somebody else, but you're the same age as your cover. Eli looked back at the invite and read aloud. Elijah Rothsberg? He's in Monaco trying to gamble away the family fortune. He was invited along with his family. You want me to pretend to be this Elijah guy? You even look alike. It's a masquerade. As long as you keep your mask on, no one has to know. What if I run into someone that knows him? His parents are out of the country. The Rothsberg family is huge. Elijah is just one of many. Don't talk to anyone for longer than a minute, and you could pull this off. I don't know, Mr. Carlyle. This might be beyond my skills. I don't know if I can spy on anyone. Mr. Carlyle patted him on the shoulder. Believe in yourself, kid. Don't be scared. You'll just go into the party, listen in, and get out before they notice anything was amiss. He grew up in downtown New Welch. He didn't know how to pretend to be a rich kid who had access to everything. He got into CIT on an academic scholarship. He didn't even have a formal suit. I don't have anything to wear, he admitted. Not a problem. I had a suit and mask sent over. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know if I could pull off being Elijah Rothsberg. Maybe you should send in someone else. The secret is to walk in there like you own the place. That's what I do. That's different. Why? You own half the city. True, but the point still stands. Mr. Carlyle patted him on the shoulder. Fake it till you make it, kid. Emo had never worn anything like this ball gown. She had worn pretty dresses for prom and weddings, but this gown was something else. The dress was a vibrant rose red that was designed to catch the eye with the off-shoulder bodice and the intricate lace. The full skirt fanned around her and made her feel like an overgrown cupcake. She curled her hair and applied a light layer of makeup. She tried to settle her nerves as 7 loomed closer. She borrowed a clutch from Jenny that was only big enough to carry her phone, keys, wallet, and a tube of lipstick. For how big this dress was, it didn't come with any pockets. There was a knock on the door at 7 sharp. She grabbed her clutch and the black lace demi-mask. She opened the door and there was Blaze looking unfairly handsome in a fitted charcoal suit. He wore a tie that matched her dress perfectly. He looked over her and she did a silly little twirl. She asked, "How do I look?" He grinned. "You look beautiful." She smiled back, her anxiety melting away slightly. "Thanks." Blaze took her hand and they made their way outside. A town car was waiting for them. She had to pause and wonder if she was just in a very vivid dream. Small-town girls didn't usually go to masquerade balls. Blaze opened the car door. "Are you ready?" No, she hadn't meant to say that. She tried to laugh it off and said, "I mean yes, as much as I'll ever be." If this was a dream, she might as well enjoy it. Chapter 17. Nova. Emo stilled at the sight of the Elizabethan-style manor. She would guess it was built in the early 1910s. They didn't make houses like that anymore. It looked like it still had most of its original facade, which took a lot of money to maintain. "Where are we exactly?" she asked. Blaze wrapped an arm around her and led her inside the house. "It's called Stonehearth. My great-grandfather bought it back in the 50s. Mo's jaw dropped. She exclaimed, "This is your house?" Blaze grimaced. "I barely grew up here. I spent most of my childhood in boarding schools." She ignored his play at humility. "Your family owns this place." Emo looked around the foyer and took note of the French aristocrat decor complete with a crystal chandelier. She stared at him in disbelief and questioned, "Who are you?" "I'm still me." He put a hand on the small of her back to guide her away. "Nothing's changed." No wonder he could afford VIP concert tickets. He led them towards the ballroom. There were women dressed in gowns with feathers, flowers, and even real diamonds. There was even a woman with a bird cage around her head. Emo was underdressed in comparison. "I feel like we just went down the rabbit hole," she said, and saw a man wore a top hat with bunny ears. "Oh look, there's the White Rabbit." Blaze pointed to a woman dressed in an enormous red gown. "And we have the Queen of Hearts." She snorted at the sight of the woman waving around a heart scepter. "And your parents really have this ball every year? You should see the Christmas party." He guided them to a table filled with plates of hors d'oeuvres. He bit into a bacon-wrapped scallop and suggested, "You should try these." She ate one and agreed they were really good. He held out his hand for her to take. "How about a dance?" She eyed warily the man dressed as a lion waltzing with the woman with the bird cage. "Do we have to?" "Focus on me and not the circus." She relented and took his hand. He led them in a slow waltz. He spun her effortlessly around the room, expertly avoiding a group of women with feathers in their hair. She was more than a little impressed. "Where'd you learn to dance?" she asked. "Dance lessons. My mom insisted." What else did she insist on? Piano, French, and an ill-advised attempt at watercolors. It was nice to know she was better than him at something. It made her feel better he wasn't as perfect as he appeared. She bit back a laugh and shook her head. "Poor little rich boy. You would have thought so too if you saw any of my paintings. We all decided quickly I might be better at sports. And that's how I got into rowing." "And did you play any other sports?" "Please say something pretentious like golf." "Polo." That was even worse. She tried to picture him on a horse. She gave in and laughed. He joined in and they spent the rest of the dance ignoring the world around them. Eli put on the plain, black domino mask before he exited the car. He looked at the old manor that was the venue for the masquerade ball, and felt like he stepped into the Great Gatsby. He handed his invitation to the person at the door. His heart beat faster as he waited for them to realize he was a fake, but they didn't. They let him pass through. Swallowing his sigh of relief, he made his way inside the large house. It might be older than Carlisle Manor. He found the ballroom quickly. The sea of people in multicolored gowns and masks was hard to miss. "Come in, Bond," Mr. Carlyle chimed in through his earpiece. "How are we looking?" Eli walked over to an impressive ice sculpture of a dragon and tried to hide behind it. If I was a member of a supervillain cult, where would I go in this big house? I guess the basement or the attic. It can't be any room that's accessible to guests looking for a private place. I'm thinking they're in the basement. They can't have anyone glimpsing them through any windows. Good thinking. Eli had to twist his way through the crowd. He nearly collided with a woman in a gown almost as large as a tent and a man who wore a top hat with bunny ears. He passed by a plague doctor and the Queen of Hearts dancing the tango. He wasn't sure if this was meant to be a masquerade or a costume party. He finally got to the hallway and started looking through rooms, trying to find his way to the basement. He found a couple canoodling in a study. The next room looked like some kind of laboratory with taxidermy animals and jars of organs. He found the library and stared up at the glass-domed ceiling. The house was so large he could wander around for days before he found the damn basement. He was about to despair when he heard the voices. Eli jumped over the couch and hid behind it as a group of men entered the library. He peered behind the couch and watched as one of the men waved the group over. "Quickly," he said. He pulled on the wall lamp beside a bookshelf and the shelf slid open, showing a doorway. "Before anyone sees us, gentlemen." They went inside the doorway one by one. The shelf reappeared and closed behind them. He gave them a few minutes before walking over to the wall lamp. He grasped it with one hand. "Not the basement, Mr. Carlyle," he remarked. "Secret room in the library. It screams Phantom of the Opera." "Be careful, kid," Mr. Carlyle warned. "These men are not the sort you can mess with and walk away in one piece." Eli winced. "Thanks, Mr. Carlyle. Be quiet as a mouse." Maybe he should turn off his earpiece. "Got it." Eli pulled on the wall lamp and the bookshelf moved, revealing the doorway. Eli stared down the darkness warily. He was nervous. He had to leave his metal suit behind, which did not make him feel better. The Brotherhood's security was thorough. He couldn't risk anyone finding the suit in the bushes while he was skulking around the venue. Eli had never felt so out of his depth. He was no James Bond. That didn't. Chapter 18 Frequency. Eli stepped into the secret doorway, trying to walk as quietly as he could down the spiral staircase. He followed the voices down to what looked like a large dining room. A dozen men were sat at a long table, talking over each other. The man at the head of the table looked bored. Eli leaned against the wall beside the doorway, out of view. They took everyone's phone at the venue's entrance and he hoped he was close enough for Mr. Carlyle to be able to record what the men were saying. They seemed to be mostly discussing money and business, mostly how to gain or keep it. Your usual evil rich people fodder. "When are we getting rid of the heroes?" a man asked. "Savior interrupted my oil deal in the Middle East. I want him gone." "Savior isn't easy to kill," the man at the head of the table replied. "He's even more powerful than Commander Valor was. Decades of wasted resources. But we did get the commander eventually. We have to be patient. Mistakes will hold us back longer." Eli stilled, unable to comprehend what he was hearing. From how they were talking, they made it sound like they were responsible for Commander Valor's death 30 years ago. The commander had been the first superhero, the head of the old guard that was formed after the war. He had been a shining beacon of hope and strength for the nation for decades, until he was defeated by his nemesis the Red Veil. "Savior will have his day eventually," a man declared. "What about Chromium?" another man questioned. "Aren't you getting tired of fighting with that old junk of metal, Cole?" The man at the head of the table sneered. "I'm working on it," Mr. Carlyle muttered. "I'd like to see him try." Eli shushed him and tried to focus on what they were saying. A man piped up. "I am more interested in your progress with the labs." They were making experiments with genetics, focusing on the super gene. They were talking about shipments for supplies. And test subjects. "I have my people working on a new weapon," the man named Cole said. "It's shown some promise. It should be ready in a few months." "And how about your son?" another man asked. "What about him? Shouldn't Hart Jr. be at this meeting?" "He's off trying to impress his new girlfriend. You know how boys his age are." "Hart." Before Eli could follow that train of thought, the men decided they wanted to head back to the ballroom. Trying not to panic, Eli made a run for it. He ran up the staircase and stopped. He didn't know how to open the bookshelf from this end. He could hear the men coming and they couldn't catch him. He could try to fry the door. It would definitely attract attention, but he had no choice. The door slid open. A blonde girl in a blue ball gown was there. It was Mo's roommate, Jenny Moon. "Come on," she hissed. "We need to go." He didn't need to be told twice. He followed her as the bookshelf closed behind them. They ran out of the library, Jenny leading the way back to the ballroom. She pulled him to the dance floor and started leading him in a stiff waltz. Eli didn't know how to dance, so he let her. He was too grateful at her quick save. He did have to ask, "How did you know about the library?" She shook her head. "We can't talk about that here. Anyone can overhear." They looked around warily at the people around them dressed in ridiculous costumes. Who knew how many of them were supervillains? Eli wasn't confident he could get them out without getting killed. "Why are you here, Jenny?" "I was invited. My grandparents go every year." "Do you know about what goes on during this party?" "A little. I don't know all of the details." He stared at Jenny, realizing how little he actually knew of her. She had always blended into the background. She was Mo's cranky roommate that didn't leave her room except for class. With her pallid complexion and dark circles under her eyes, she always looked exhausted with everyone. The blue dress was a change from her usual gray sweaters, and emphasized that Jenny was conventionally attractive. She was tall with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her ability to blend in and go unnoticed was peculiar. She had the kind of prettiness that attracted attention. Maybe it wasn't normal. "Jenny," he whispered. "Are you a—" She shushed him quickly. "Not here."
Eli inwardly sighed.
He looked over to the doorway and the Brotherhood entered and were mingling with the other guests. Cole Hart walked through the crowd, parting them like the Red Sea. The man stopped in front of a young couple and Eli knew that had to be Blaze. "M.O.?" he nearly exclaimed. "How is she here?" "They're on a date. A masquerade is a little pretentious for my taste, but that's Hart for you," Jenny answered. Cole Hart dragged his son away, leaving M.O. standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. The brunette looked around, unsure of what to do next. She looked so pretty in that red gown. Like a princess. "You could ask her to dance," Jenny suggested. "She can't know that I was here." Jenny already knew he was here, but he could worry about that later. She had saved him instead of leaving him to have to fend off a dozen supervillains. He didn't want to have to swear two girls into secrecy. "Who are you supposed to be?" Jenny asked. "I know you didn't get invited." "I'm pretending to be someone else." "Who?" "Elijah Rothsberg." Jenny laughed drily. "You're nothing like him. You know him." "He's my cousin." Jenny gave him a knowing look. "And he's supposed to be in Monaco." Eli had tried his best to do some basic research about Elijah Rothsberg, who was your typical spoiled trust fund baby. A quick look at his Twitter and Instagram accounts made Eli instantly dislike him. He felt better about having to steal his identity for the night. It wasn't like Eli could ruin the guy's reputation any more than it already was. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm just stealing his identity for one night. It's for a good cause." "I believe you. Now go ask M.O. to dance." "I can't." Jenny raised a blonde eyebrow at him. "You're not Eli, remember? You're Elijah Rothsberg. You can do whatever you want, including dancing with a pretty girl at a party." He glanced at the doorway where the Harts disappeared off to and back to where M.O. was standing uncomfortably by the buffet table. He just wanted one dance. It couldn't hurt, right? The bad guys weren't going anywhere. He took off his earpiece and purple electricity sparked in his fingers, effectively disabling the device. Chapter 19 Kinetic. Eli pocketed the disabled earpiece and made his way over to the girl in the red gown. Even with the mask M.O. was wearing, he could recognize her easily. His attention was only on her despite the gaudy costumes and gowns around him. She went behind the ice statue of the dragon and he looked at her through the ice. She noticed him. He waited as she stepped out from behind the statue. She tucked her hair behind her ears. It was still the same M.O. no matter what she wore. "Hi," she said. He smiled.
"I'm Montag."
"And you are." She didn't recognize him. Maybe it was the strobe lights or the mask he wore hid enough of his face. Jenny was right. He didn't have to be Eli. He could be someone else entirely, and there was heady temptation to it. "I'm Elijah," he replied. "Do you want to dance?" She looked unsurely at the doorway. "I don't know. My boyfriend will be back soon. It's just a dance." He gave her an encouraging smile. "Besides, don't you want to make him sweat a little for leaving you all alone in this big ballroom?" "I'm not exactly alone." He glanced at a man dressed as a clown with a big green top hat passing by. Who could forget the cast of Alice in Wonderland? They seem really friendly. She bit back a smile. "I do feel out of place among them, like I don't belong. If it makes you feel better, I feel the exact same way. This isn't really my kind of thing." "What is your kind of thing?" "Dancing with pretty girls." He offered his hand for her to take. So, if you would please put me out of my misery? She laughed before giving in. One dance. He agreed and he tried to mimic how Jenny led him in a waltz. The best he could do was swaying them from side to side. Emo didn't seem to mind. She giggled when he tried to twirl her. Have you been to this ball before? She asked. I've been a few times and it's the same every year. Kind of weird. Eccentric, he quipped. It's the rich people word for weird. She smiled, her brown eyes staring up at him. You remind me of someone. Nervous that she might have figured him out, he tried to play it cool. Maybe I just have one of those faces. She reached up to touch his mask and he stopped her, his hand on her wrist. Sorry. I was just curious. He released her. It's all right, but the point of a masked ball is to have masks on. Would it make you feel more comfortable if I took my mask off first? She reached for the ribbon at the back of her head and untied it. She took off the lacy black mask and he could see all of her face again. Now it's your turn. Before he could make a decision, Jenny came over. She had a mask that was held up by a stick. She grabbed his arm and urged, We need to go. Why? Rothsberg came back early from Monaco. Oh crap. He turned back to Emo regretfully. It was nice meeting you, but I have to go. Before Emo could reply, he and Jenny turned and ran from the ballroom. Security was not far off and Jenny led him down the maze of hallways. What was with rich people in these enormous houses? He could get lost in there and starve if it wasn't for Jenny. She seemed to know where to go. She led him to what looked like an office. He helped her push a dresser in front of the door. The security guards banged on the door trying to get in. Trying to keep calm, he asked, What now? Over here. There were a set of glass doors that led to a veranda. They hopped over the stone railing and to the grassy lawn. Jenny hiked up her skirts as they ran towards a town car. They got in quickly and they watched the security guards running towards them. Drive! Jenny exclaimed. Thankfully, the driver listened and drove them away from there. Blaze came back much to Mo's relief. She ate a few stuffed olives as she waited awkwardly on what to do next. Blaze looked upset until he saw her. His expression softening. He grabbed an olive and ate it quickly. Are you okay? She asked. It's just my dad. He's kind of an unholy. She rubbed his arm comfortingly. What did he say? Just his usual vitriol of impossibly high expectations and wanting me to be exactly like him. He scoffed. Never mind that. It's a real mood killer. Let's get out of here. Where? Let's get a late dinner. She reached into her clutch and looked at the time on her phone. It's almost midnight. Where would we go? There's a burger joint in town that's always open. She gestured to her ball gown. We can't go there dressed like this. We'd look insane. We wouldn't be the craziest thing they've seen there. Believe me. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and led her away from the ballroom. They also have this chocolate sundae I know you'll like. The promise of chocolate was hard to refuse. They went outside and scooted into the town car. Blaze told the driver where to go and seemed a lot more relaxed now that they were away from the house. Now that Mo's curiosity about masquerades was fulfilled, she didn't blame him for wanting to get out of there. He took off his mask and threw it to the floor. You talked to anybody while I was gone? I met this guy. His name was Elijah. He seemed nice and then he ran off. Blaze told her. You might have met the gatecrasher pretending to be him. Security chased him off the property. Why would anyone try to break into the party? Fun? Maybe he wanted to steal something. Blaze shrugged. Who knows? He's not our problem. She turned around and watched the mansion disappear from the back window. What a night. It was time to go back to real life. And she was eager to return to some semblance of normality. Chapter 20 Condensation. Eli took off the mask in relief. That was a close one. He lamented over not having his suit with him. He could have flown out of there instead of playing a stressful game of tag with security. Jenny was staring out the window. She had told the driver to take them back to CIT. She seemed content to ignore him for the rest of the ride. It was going to be a long 2 hours. Jenny reached into her clutch and pulled out a mobile phone. She tossed it to him. It was his phone. He thought he would never see it again. I was snatching our phones from security when I saw Rothsberg arriving, she explained. He was very confused when they told him he was already there, and apparently his invitation got lost in the mail. He shrugged, not really caring about inconveniencing Elijah Rothsberg. Thanks. He unlocked his phone. There were several missed calls and texts from Mr. Carlyle. He grimaced and sent his mentor a text summarizing everything that happened at the party sans his dance with Mo. Hopefully, Mr. Carlyle believed his excuse that his earpiece malfunctioned. Pocketing his phone, he turned back to Jenny. You never answered my question. How did you know about the library? It wasn't my first time at that house. I learned a few of its secrets while avoiding that awful party. And how did you know I needed your help at that exact moment? She paused before replying. I was at the party. You needed help and I gave it. Can't you just accept that and move on? You have a superpower. I didn't say that. You're not saying you don't either. What is it? He pressed on. Invisibility? Walking through walls? She rolled her blue eyes, refusing to answer. Telepathy? He continued. Shape-shifting. She went back to watching the view outside the window. She was misguided if she thought the silent treatment was going to work on him. It was Catherine's favorite thing to do, and it was no match for Eli's ability to talk for hours. He would wear her down eventually. I can keep this going. He is still 2 hours away and this town car isn't that big, he warned. So, you might as well tell me what your power is and get it over with. Are you always this annoying? He nodded. Yes. I don't know how MO stands you. She sighed. Fine. I have a superpower and I am not telling you what it is. That's my business. I used it to get you out of that party because if they caught you, it wouldn't have ended well. Do you know about the Brotherhood? There's some kind of weird meeting that happens and that's all I know. I have no connection to them and I'm not interested. Are you part of the HL? She snorted. I'm not joining your boy band. It is not a boy band, he countered. And why don't you want to join? Why would I? I have no plans on running around the city in spandex. I'm perfectly content being an average person living my own life. But you have abilities that other people would kill to have. He added begrudgingly, whatever that ability may be, you have a duty to use it for good. I don't have a duty to do anything. He stilled. He had been too offended at her dismissal of the Heroic League to pay attention to the fact she knew he was part of it. Did she know about his alter ego? Just how much did she really know? How did you know that I'm part of the HL? He asked. The same way I knew about the library. I don't snoop, she replied. I didn't have a choice with knowing. And no, I am not telling anyone what I know. You can leave me alone about keeping your identity a secret. He couldn't even be relieved because he was too confused and frustrated with how vague she was being. But how do you know? Jenny was done talking. She pulled out AirPods from her clutch and was content to ignore him for the rest of the ride home. Eli leaned back in his seat and scowled. He could fry her phone out of spite, but he had a feeling she would kick him out of the car. He didn't want to walk all the way home. The next day, he skipped lunch at the dining hall to see Mr. Carlyle at his house. He handed over the disabled earpiece and hoped he didn't look as guilty as he felt. Mr. Carlyle's face was blank as he inspected the earpiece. Eli swallowed and tried to keep himself from confessing there and then. Did you enjoy dancing with MO? Mr. Carlyle smiled at Eli's shocked face. You do know I was still listening in before you killed the earpiece, right? He grimaced. He was suddenly afraid he was going to get kicked out of the HL just because he wanted to dance with a girl. He tried apologizing. I am so sorry, Mr. Carlyle. His mentor patted him on the shoulder. Don't sweat it, kid. I was young and in love once too. I would have done the exact same thing. Eli relaxed slightly. At least Mr. Carlyle wasn't angry at him. He had been ready to be scolded for the next few years. That's what Catherine would have done if he tried something like that with her. Besides, you got the info we needed. His mentor smiled. You did a good job, rookie. He remembered the Brotherhood's discussion about the genetic experiments. It worried him then and he hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. He asked, why do you think they're experimenting on the super gene? Messing with nature. Seeing how they can manipulate it to further their nefarious means? Who knows how their minds work? Mr. Carlyle replied, don't worry about it, Eli. We've got it covered. His mentor's reassurance didn't completely erase his worry, but he had no choice but to trust the HL knew what they were doing. They had been doing this long before he'd been born. He left Carlisle Manor and flew back to the city campus. He still had a few minutes left to eat lunch if he rushed. He flew into his dorm room directly, careful to not be seen by anyone. He closed the window behind him and drew the curtains. He was starving. He could grab a sandwich and scarf it down on the way to class. He was so focused on taking off the metal suit that he forgot to lock the door. And that's when Tadashi walked in. His roommate froze at the doorway, his mouth hanging open. Eli froze, not knowing what to do next. OFCK, Chapter 21 Bond. Tadashi dropped the open bag of cheese balls he was holding. The orange balls fell and scattered on the carpet. This had not been what he was expecting to see after lunch. He needed to get a textbook before his next class only to find electric in his room. Eli took off the metal suit and it folded into itself like a large origami. It went into the metal box Eli had brought at the start of the semester and kept under his bed. So that's what had been inside of it. Tadashi's brain felt like it was going to explode. Holy SHT. Eli was electric. Electric was Eli. His best friend and roommate was a superhero. He pointed to Eli and to the metal case where the suit was hidden. You. Eli approached him warily. Tadashi. You. The other boy nodded. Me. How? Tadashi was reduced to singular words. Anything more was too much for him. He might collapse or die. He didn't know what would happen. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. It was his tell when he was uncomfortable. The same way Amo tucked her hair behind her ears. Tadashi knew these things about his friends because he considered himself observant. It turned out that was nothing but a big fat lie. Eli closed the door behind him, giving them some privacy. It's a long story. Tell, Tadashi insisted. Now. We have to get to class. What? Tadashi glared at him. No. Screw class. They had more important things to discuss. Like the fact Eli was a superhero and didn't tell him. Eli had superpowers and kept that to himself. Tadashi shoved him lightly on the shoulder. Talk. Eli sighed and took a seat on his bed. He said, I don't even know where to begin. How about the beginning? Tadashi could speak more than one word again. Hooray. Did you always have powers? How did you join the HL? Where did you get your suit? I was born with my powers, Eli explained. My powers started manifesting during puberty. And last summer I was recruited by the HL. They gave me the suit. Tadashi couldn't even hide how jealous he was. He wanted superpowers and to join a superhero league too. Tadashi questioned, You've had powers since you were a kid? Why didn't you tell me? It's not really something I talked about with anyone. You can't just slip it in during a conversation. You could have totally slipped it in. You have superpowers and you're a superhero. People find out. Eli cut him off, alarmed. People can't find out. It's dangerous for people to know. Why? Because once my identity is out, any supervillain can come after me and anyone close to me. Eli gave him a knowing look. And that includes my friends. That made sense. It still didn't get rid of the hurt Tadashi felt at being excluded. He told Eli everything and thought his friend did the same. You could have told me, Tadashi said somber. I can keep a secret. I couldn't tell anyone. First rule of the HL, you don't talk about the HL. Tadashi smiled, getting the reference. Second rule of the HL, you don't talk about the HL. Eli smiled slightly. I'm serious, Tadashi. You have to keep this to yourself. No one can find out. This has to stay between us. Does Amo know? No, Eli looks sad. And she won't find out if I can help it. Because you love her. Eli stared at him. She's your weakness, Tadashi continued. Easiest way to get to you would be through her, right? His friend looked like he got punched in the gut. Eli looked away, swallowing. Maybe Eli hadn't quite thought about what Amo meant for his alter ego. Tadashi couldn't imagine having to hide a part of himself from someone for their own safety. Hey! Tadashi patted him on the shoulder, reassuringly. Your secret is safe with me. Thanks, Tadashi. Tadashi grinned. You're welcome, Electric.
Eli groaned.
Don't call me that. A week later and Tadashi was ready to explode. He may have told a white lie. He could keep a secret if he wanted to. He just didn't have the best track record. He couldn't help his mouth, as if it had a mind of its own. He wanted to desperately tell someone about Eli's secret. He was wrecked with the impulse. Every time Electric appeared on the news or was mentioned in conversation, he had to stop himself from shouting to the world, That's my friend. Eli would kill him. And if Eli didn't, a supervillain might. Fear was the only thing keeping Tadashi from screaming out the secret at the top of his lungs. That and Eli would never talk to him again for betraying his trust. He was such a good friend. He bumped into Amo in the hallway after classes. He had been avoiding her recently. His mouth seemed to want to betray him the most when she was around. Dash! She pulled him into a hug. I missed you. Where have you been? You know how it is. I had classes. Midterms were brutal. And finals are just around the corner. Lurking and trying to get me to break. He laughed nervously, then tried to deflect the conversation back to her. How have you been? Did you finish your model of that building shaped like a donut?
Montag pouted.
It's not a donut. Her last building model was round with a hollow center. It definitely looked like a donut. She was in denial. Tadashi had been the one to point it out to her, and she glared at him like it was his fault. He raised his hands in surrender. Whatever you say. And yes, I did finish it. My professor liked it. She gave him a look as if he had no taste and couldn't understand her genius. Where's Eli? I haven't seen him around either. Part of being Electric's best friend was helping cover for him. Tadashi said the first lie he could think of. He's hiking. Hiking? Yep. He nodded eagerly. He joined the hiking club and that's his new thing.
Montag blinked, confused.
I didn't even know we had a hiking club. We do now. There was no going back. He would have to stick to this lie until the bitter end. He would have to tell Eli that he joined the fictional hiking club. At least Eli would have a good excuse for his disappearing acts now. Tadashi was a really good friend. Chapter 22 Potential. Emo was studying in the library with Tadashi when there was another news report about Smokeburn. He seemed to be committing more arson than normal. He had to be the bane of every firefighter in the area. Emo paused at the video footage of the new supervillain that was always with Smokeburn. She showed her phone to Tadashi. They both looked at the man wearing the red mask. She asked, "What's his name?" "I heard it's Sunspark." Tadashi's eyebrows furrowed and he added hastily, "Don't ask how I know that." She didn't try to figure out what that meant. He and Eli had been acting weird lately, and she couldn't get a decent explanation from anyone. "Sunspark doesn't sound very villainous," she pointed out. "That's what I said. I thought it would be something like combustion or fire thrower. He sounds like he should be a hero instead." "Yeah, a hero that throws fire at people." Tadashi showed her a clip of Sunspark tossing fire at policemen who ducked behind their cars to avoid getting burned. Giving people third-degree burns isn't very heroic. "But he doesn't kill people," she countered. "Smokeburn has never cared about body counts. This new guy has burned down buildings and injured a few civilians, but he hasn't killed anyone." Tadashi paused before he replayed the clip of Sunspark fighting with the policeman. Emo pointed to the screen and explained. Smokeburn would have aimed for the cars and caused explosions. It would have taken out the cops faster. Sunspark is almost throwing around them. Tadashi slowed down the clip and realized how slowly Sunspark was throwing the fire, giving the cops enough time to duck and get out of the way. I hadn't noticed that before. Maybe he's not as bad as the other supervillains. Tadashi gave her a look and handed her back the phone. He's still a bad guy. But he's not evil. He's not a hero. No, she played a video of Electric saving a puppy that fell into a manhole. He's not Electric. Tadashi grinned. That's my man. He's my new favorite superhero. You finally met him? Not all of us get to be saved by a hero from falling debris, Emo. Emo didn't even try to hide how smug she was that she got to meet the new superhero and Tadashi hadn't. He could be as bitter as he wanted to be. She teased. Are you still jealous about that? Seething. She saw the time on her phone and began putting away her things. I have to go. Blaze is taking me to that new sushi place in town. How is Blaze? Tadashi asked. It's going well between you two? He's great. Really sweet and nice, she explained as she packed things into her backpack. He loves to surprise me. You hate surprises. He knows. He still does it. It must be annoying. The most annoying thing is he surprises me with the best things, so I can't even get angry. Tadashi laughed. I'm happy for you, Emo. Thanks. She slung her backpack behind her. We should all hang out. Maybe we can go somewhere this weekend. Jenny wouldn't go. Her roommate didn't bother to hide her disdain for her boyfriend or her friends. Emo wasn't too bothered by it since Jenny seemed to dislike almost everyone. Emo considered it a badge of honor to be considered one of the few people in the world Jenny moonliked. Sure. Where do you want to go? Emo thought about it before declaring, mini golf. Tadashi nodded. It could be fun. And hopefully, her friends would bond with Blaze and it would all work out. Eli was exhausted. He smelled like sewer from saving a litter of puppies from a manhole. He had gotten into a fight with two muggers who tried to go after a poor woman in an alley. And there was the fight with Sunspark who had tried to barbecue the cops. He wanted to lie down and sleep for 12 hours straight. He changed out of his suit and pulled at his t-shirt to sniff it. The sewer smell was still there. He needed a shower. He grabbed a towel to head to the showers. He saw Emo coming up the stairs. She was holding a paper bag in her hands. Hi, he said. She smiled, moved to hug him, and he stopped her. He explained. I smell like sewer. Don't ask. Did you go hiking in the sewers? He remembered that Tadashi gave her the cover story of him joining some non-existent hiking club, and that was why he was always disappearing. He didn't know whether he should be annoyed or amused. Tadashi couldn't have picked a real club? It would take anyone 5 seconds to confirm they were lying. Something like that, he replied finally. What have you been up to? I got sushi with Blaze. She raised the paper bag. And I promised to get some for Dash. Could you give this to him? Eli accepted the paper bag. He didn't know how Blaze Heart did it. Fling fireballs at cops in the afternoon, then go to dinner with Mo like this flip between two lives was normal. Eli envied how effortless Blaze managed to juggle this duality. In the meanwhile, Eli was barely keeping it together. Eli hated him and envied his skill in time management. I was thinking we haven't been able to hang out lately. You and Dash haven't had a chance to get to know Blaze, Mo said. Maybe we could go play mini-golf this weekend? Mini-golf. Eli didn't know what he'd dread more, mini-golf or hanging out with Blaze Heart. It'll be a fun bonding experience. Mo stared at him with her doe eyes pleadingly. Please, Eli. For me. She could have asked for anything and he would have found a way to get it for her. Eli was soft like a big cotton puffball. Was he always like this? Or did Mo turn him into such a sap? It was those doe eyes. They made him weak. Resigned to his fate, he answered. That sounds like a great idea. Chapter 23 Pattern. The dreaded weekend finally came. Tadashi had the flu. After getting Tadashi checked out of the clinic and shoving some meds into him, Eli tucked him into bed and bundled him up like an overstuffed burrito. He considered canceling on Mo to make sure his roommate survived the night, but Tadashi was not having it. Go have fun, Tadashi insisted. I'll be fine. I have Gatorade and Echo's latest album to get me through the pain. I don't mind staying with you. Don't use me as an excuse to get out of hanging out with your crush and her boyfriend. Eli sighed. It wouldn't be so bad if you're there with me, but I'm going to be the third wheel. And I don't really want to see them be all coupley around me. Tadashi glared at him blearily. Your sister didn't raise a quitter. You met Catherine once. Tadashi acted like he knew Eli's sister so well. He was right, but Eli was never going to admit it. Am I wrong though? Tadashi shrugged. She's totally hot. If I wasn't already in love with Lily Choi, I would be into your sister. Eli grimaced. Gross. And she terrifies me. She has that effect on people. There was a knock at the door. Mo entered and she had a thermos filled with chicken soup. She poured it into a mug for Tadashi, who held on to it like a sad Victorian orphan. She touched his forehead to check his temperature. Poor Dash, she said. We could reschedule for when you're feeling better. Tadashi took a sip of soup. Don't ruin your night for me. You must go on and have fun in my stead. It's really not a big deal, Dash. You must remember me as I was before my illness, when I was healthy and full of life. Are you sure you wouldn't mind us going without you? Let me live vicariously through you. Mo smiled wryly, then told Eli. Jenny agreed to come with us, so that should be interesting. Eli didn't know what to feel. On one hand, he wasn't going to be a third wheel to Blaze and Mo. On the other hand, he was going to have to hang out with Jenny Moon, who held him in disdain. Ever since the masquerade ball, Jenny ignored him, and there had been no possibility of bonding over superpowers. I thought she was a vampire. I've never seen her out in the sun, Tadashi remarked. She's not a vampire, Mo added jokingly, though I have never seen her in the sun either. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. This isn't like a double date, right? Mo laughed and smacked him lightly on the arm. Don't be silly, Eli. I wouldn't do that to you. Mo didn't lie. It wasn't a double date, at least not officially. She had been pleasantly surprised and excited when Jenny agreed to go with them. She realized she could set her up with Eli. They were two of her favorite people and they might be good together. Jenny and Tadashi wouldn't have worked out. She would have eaten him. Eli might have a fighting chance of survival. She was trying to find a date for Tadashi before he got sick. The triple date was down to a double. She was still going to make it work. They piled into Blaze's car, and he drove them to the city where they had a mini golf course. They got their golf clubs and went to the first course, which looked like a candyland with fake ice cream sculptures and donuts. Mo and Eli had never played before. Blaze took golf lessons as a child. Of course you did, Mo teased. Polo and golf. Rich people are so predictable. I'm on the rowing team. Mo scrunched up her nose. You're not making it better. Rowing isn't some commoner sport like football or hockey. Blaze rolled his eyes. Do you want me to teach you how to play or not? Yes, please. Mo smiled at him. He got behind her and positioned her hands how to swing the golf club. The ball flew into the air and landed a few inches from the hole. Mo nearly jumped up and down in joy. She ran towards the hole and very, very gently tapped her ball in with the club. "Birdie," Jenny called out. Blaze looked at her surprised. "You know how to play?" Jenny didn't reply. Instead, she swung her club and her ball flew into the air, landing into the hole. Ace. Eli didn't know a lot of golf terminology, but he knew what that one meant, wholly known. He learned how to aim and swing to mixed results. He wasn't doing that bad for a first-time golfer. Mo was still better, but she wasn't bragging about it. Jenny and Blaze were a different story. It didn't take them long to become competitive and try to outdo each other. Jenny was in the lead by a few points, much to Blaze's annoyance. Her cool confidence against his increasing frustration was a fun sight to behold. Blaze's ball landed in a bad spot and he swore loudly. Jenny rolled her eyes before taking a swing. Her ball knocked his into an even worse spot. Blaze pointed a finger at her and began to accuse her of sabotage. "They're just ignoring us," Mo told him. "Do you think if we leave they would notice?" "I think if we leave they'll murder each other," Eli replied. Jenny leaned her chin on the top of her club. "Stop whining and take the shot, Hart. We don't have all day." Blaze glared at her before taking a swing. His ball landed a few feet away from the hole. "FCK me." "Duff," Jenny chided before she swung and her ball flew into the air. It landed by the hole and rolled in. "Oh look, another birdie." Blaze looked like he was about to bludgeon Jenny to death with the golf club. She showed not an ounce of fear. "Come on, hacker. We still have 3 holes left," she goaded. "Loser has to buy ice cream." Chapter 24 Buffer. Maybe mini golf wasn't the best idea. A movie or karaoke might have been a better alternative. Nothing that was competitive. Mo had never seen her roommate like this. 4. Jenny called out as her ball came flying at them. Mo and Eli jumped out of the way. They were learning golf terms quickly, mainly the ones that meant to stay out of the way. Mo and Eli were having a good time at 3rd and 4th place respectively. They weren't trying to win and just trying to enjoy the experience. Eli went first as his ball was the furthest away from the hole. He swung and the ball bounced around before landing several feet away from the hole. He sighed and Mo patted him on the shoulder. She swung and her ball ended up near his. Eventually, his ball stopped several inches from the hole. "I got it." Mo swung and her ball knocked his into the hole before following in. "There you go. Teamwork." They high-fived. "This is fun," Mo said. "We should do this more." "I can see Tadashi liking this. Maybe we can go after finals," Eli agreed. Jenny was rarely invested in something that wasn't related to school. She seemed to genuinely enjoy beating Blaze at mini-golf. Blaze looked more frustrated as the game continued and Jenny maintained her lead. She was beating them all, but she was only rubbing it in Blaze's face. "That was an eagle," Blaze declared after he got his ball in. Jenny rolled her eyes. "That was clearly a bogey. I'm not surprised you don't know the difference, hacker." "What's an eagle again?" Eli asked Mo. She shook her head. "I only know ace and I'm still not sure about par." "What does hacker mean?" "It means somebody who's terrible at golf," Jenny cut in. "Pretty boy here can't even handle putt-putt." Blaze's mouth opened and closed like a fish, his face turning red. "I am going to murder you." She raised a blonde eyebrow at him. "I'd like to see you try." Jenny turned away and walked off to the next course. Blaze followed her, his jaw clenched. Mo didn't know how to diffuse the tension, and hoped that it didn't come to them trying to hit each other with their golf clubs. She didn't know who would win between Blaze's size and strength and Jenny's endless reserves of wrath. Jenny had won by a single point. This seemed to take the wind out of Blaze's sails as they left to go have dinner at the Korean barbecue restaurant nearby. Eli was the designated fryer as he flipped the meat on the grill. Mo was preparing little beds of lettuce and cutting them up with scissors. Blaze glared sullenly at the blonde across from him. "You cheated." Jenny took a sip of iced tea. "Don't be a sore loser. I was just better." "How are you that good? Did you take lessons?" "It's my granddad's favorite hobby. I tagged along and learned." "She's from Loxchase too," Mo supplied. "Right, Jen? I never saw you around town," Blaze remarked. "You were always away at boarding school." Jenny picked up meat on the grill with her chopsticks. "Our families know each other." That was the wrong thing to say because it made Blaze glare down at his plate. Mo took one of his hands in hers and squeezed reassuringly. She knew how he hated any talk of his family. His hand was warmer than usual, but she didn't mind. The corn on the grill overheated and flew into the air. Mo yelped as one almost got her in the eye. Eli spooned some on their plates to avoid the corn from trying to maim them. Mo took over flipping the meat on the grill. Blaze turned to Eli and asked, "Where are you from, Wild?" He was confused at the sudden questioning. "From here. I was born in New Welch." "It must be nice to be so close to home," Blaze said. "Makes it easier to be with your loved ones."
Eli stilled.
"What does that mean?" "Only that you're lucky to be so close to everyone you care about." The corn overheated again, making Mo yelped as a kernel flew by her ear. She reached over and spooned the remaining corn on Eli's plate. Eli glared at Blaze, his hand clenched on the wooden chopsticks. They were close to splintering in his grip. "I really hope that's not a threat." Blaze held his gaze unflinching. "I don't know, Wild. Do I have any reason to threaten you?" Heart pounding in his chest, Eli tried to calm himself. The lights in the restaurant flickered a few times, concerning the staff and patrons. A hand touched his and Mo squeezed his hand reassuringly. He exhaled and the light stopped flickering, her worried smile calming him instantly. "Okay," she mouthed. He nodded. He refused to look at Blaze. He knew the other guy wanted to make him upset and he was not going to rise to the bait. Mo squeezed his hand once more before letting go. Blaze immediately took her hand in his and he smiled sweetly at her. Mo smiled back and he kissed her cheek. Mo blushed and laughed. Eli's stomach dropped somewhere around his shoes at the display. He was reminded that Mo was still Blaze's girlfriend, and he was the third wheel in this farce of a double date. Jenny didn't even try to interact with him, and he was sitting beside her. Jenny flagged over a waiter and asked, "Could you bring us some ice cream? This guy's paying." Blaze stared at her in disbelief. "What?" she said. "You lost, remember? You owe us ice cream." Later, Eli stood beside Jenny outside the restaurant as Blaze and Mo took care of the bill. "You shouldn't give up so easily," Jenny remarked. "You still have a chance with Mo." Eli's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" She gave him a dry look. "The same way you seem to know everything and won't explain why?" "Actually, I knew about your crush on her because I have eyes and it's glaringly obvious." He rubbed the back of his neck. "What's your point? Mo and Blaze aren't going to end up together. And you think I can end up with her? Only if you fight for her," Jenny concluded. "Otherwise, you don't deserve her at all." Chapter 25 Charge. Mo was excited to be coming home for the Thanksgiving weekend. Not even the long plane ride could dim her happiness at being able to see her family again. When her plane landed at the San May airport, her family was there to greet her. She ran and hugged them all, even when her little brothers whined. They were even taller than the last time she saw them. They hovered over her now. What happened to when they were little gremlins? They were becoming tall noodles. "Uncle Felix." She ran over to hug him. He was her dad's twin brother and looked almost identical to him aside from his hair, which was peppered with gray. She pulled away smiling. "You made it. I thought you'd be too busy at work. The city won't burn down without me for an hour. Besides, I'm not the only employee. It's called delegating." He took her bag from her. "Tell us about your semester. What have you been up to in the East Coast?" "Yes." Her mom wrapped an arm around hers as they walked out of the airport and to the parking lot. "Do you have a boyfriend?" Mo tucked her hair behind her eyes. "Sort of." Her dad gave her a look. "You either do or you don't, Nay. Which is it?" The use of her childhood nickname did not make Mo feel better. She had been Nay or Nene since she was baby and it was never going away. Her dad unlocked the car and they squeezed in. Uncle Felix got on his motorbike. It was an hour-long drive from San May to Bay Valley. Her family did not let her escape the boyfriend question. "So what's his name?" her mom asked. "Blaze Hart." "What's his major?" her dad asked. "Aerospace engineering." "He's a junior." The line of questioning went on even as they got home. Mo just wanted to eat lumpia in peace, but the line of questioning continued with her grandparents. They all wanted to know what he looked like. They wanted to know why she didn't introduce him to them yet. "We've only been dating for a month. It's too soon," she reasoned. "That's true," Uncle Felix agreed. "You don't bring anyone home to meet the family unless you're sure they're the one. You barely knew Susanna when you brought her home," her dad pointed out. "You dated for less than 3 weeks. When you're sure, you don't wait. Even when it ends in divorce?" The discussion went to Uncle Felix's doomed marriage, and what was the appropriate amount of time before introducing a significant other to the family. Mo was just happy the heat was off her. She loved her family despite how insane they were. It was good to be home. "What do you mean you can't go home for Thanksgiving?" Eli sighed and rubbed the back of his neck with his free hand. He knew Catherine wouldn't take well the news he was too busy to see her for the holiday. Mr. Carlyle had called him the day before to ask him to look into a factory by the docks. Thanksgiving was the best time to sneak in, and he couldn't say no to his mentor. Not after his earpiece mishap during the masquerade ball. I have to take care of something for my internship, he explained, glad he was doing this over the phone and not in person. You know how much this internship means to me. What kind of company is forcing people to work through the holidays? Catherine questioned. He could imagine her annoyed face. The multi-billion-dollar ones? That's the evils of industrial capitalism, and I taught you better than to follow blindly. He sighed. I'll see you for Chrismukkah. What am I supposed to tell Marie? That you love Mr. Carlyle more than her. Tell Aunt Marie I'm sorry and I'll make it up to her. You better. Catherine was softening and said, I'll see you soon, Eli. Try not to work yourself to death. Says the workaholic, he quipped, smiling. Love you. I'll see you soon. I love you too, nerd. A few days later, Eli was outside the factory by the docks. Sneaking in was easy. They had less security on staff for the holidays, so it didn't take him long to get inside. Mr. Carlyle only wanted photos of whatever they were making. He only found large shipments of metal. After taking enough photos, he flew out of there and made his way back to the city campus. It was mostly empty, with only a few students that stayed for the long weekend. The dining hall was closed, and he resigned himself to a sad dinner of ramen and chips. He took off his suit and left it to get food from the convenience store. Tadashi was home for the long weekend and he had the room to himself. He had never spent Thanksgiving by himself before. It was a lonely experience. He went back to his room. The hunger was making him more despondent. He froze when he saw Catherine standing by his bed. She pressed on the metal case and his suit automatically unraveled itself, ready for use. His stomach dropped and he felt cold sweat crawl up his spine. What are you doing here, Catherine? He asked. You couldn't come for Thanksgiving, so I thought I'd bring it to you. Her gaze slid from the metal suit to him, her brown eyes deceptively blank. I know how much your internship means to you. I can explain. He needed to fix this. She wasn't meant to find out about any of this. He needed to come up with some kind of excuse, even when he knew it was futile. The flint in her eyes flickered and he could see how angry she was. Explain what? His tongue was useless in his mouth. He didn't know how to answer. That you kept this a secret, she continued. That you willingly put yourself in danger? It's not like that. Yes, it is. She glared at him, furious. You idiot. I could have killed you. Chapter 26, Reaction. You wouldn't have hurt me, Eli reasoned. And I couldn't fight with you. Catherine scoffed. What did you think would happen if we crossed paths? I had no idea it was you in that tin can. I could have killed you before you had the chance to tell me. You don't kill people. He knew some of her crimes. You couldn't be labeled a supervillain and member of the VA without breaking the law. And he knew killing was against the VA's code of ethics. Catherine may have maimed people, but she wasn't a murderer. I could always make exceptions. She glared at him. And what if on that day I decided that I was okay with murdering someone? You were the unlucky idiot in my way? He rubbed the back of his neck. That didn't happen. It could have. He sighed. But it didn't, Cat. Everything is okay. It is not okay, she retorted. I made a promise to Mom when she died that I would take care of you. And now you're flying around in a metal jumpsuit just asking to be shot down. I'm being careful. You're a superhero. You can't be careful enough. Her voice rose as her anger escaped. I should know. I fought with them and won. Eli had never seen his sister in action before. He had heard stories and seen the occasional news report but never imagined he would have to experience it for himself. The HL was wary of her for the abilities she had shown over the years, but they didn't actually know the full extent of Catherine's power. You know what we say in the VA, right? She continued. Heroes never age. They die young, and we're the ones that caused that. I'm not going to die. You're taking things out of proportion. No hero thinks it's going to be their last day until it is. It was like talking to a brick wall. Catherine was the most stubborn person he knew. He had no way of getting through to her when she was like this. What were you even thinking? Becoming a superhero? She demanded. When you know how I feel about them. How I spent the last decade having to fend them off. It's not about you, he replied. I always wanted to be a superhero. Ever since I was a kid. When my powers developed, I knew I was meant to be part of this world. I kept you from that world for your own safety. That's not your choice to make anymore, he countered.
I'm 19.
I'm not a kid. I make my own decisions about my life. He could see she was hurt. Catherine didn't like to show weakness. She hid it away under layers of carefully created armor. Is this because I wouldn't let you join the VA? She asked. I only wanted to join because you were part of it. And I looked up to you. There was a time he considered becoming a supervillain. He had grown up around the VA headquarters. He admired his older sister who was strong and fearless. She could do anything and he wanted to be like her. You're too young, she said. You should be going to class and trying to get a date. I wasn't too young to be a hero, he pointed out. And the new supervillain is only a year older than me. She rolled her eyes. Smokeburn's kid. He stilled. You know about him? Smokeburn brought him in one day to HQ, she explained. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. Jealousy felt like a sharp blade piercing through him. Blaze Hart got to join the VA when Eli couldn't. Just another thing he had over Eli. Blaze wasn't being discouraged from his dreams by his family. Why is it okay for him to join the VA and not me? He asked. His father insisted on it. We normally don't accept anyone younger than 21. You were 18 when you joined the VA. And I spent years behind a desk away from the action, she pointed out. I wasn't fighting off seasoned villains that wouldn't hesitate to murder me. Is it just because of my age I couldn't join? He had been scared to ask this question, knowing the answer but not wanting to hear the truth. You don't have the right temperament to be a villain, she answered. You're right. You're a hero. You're brave, stupid, and have a need to be glorified. You wouldn't be able to stand being hated. People don't hate you. Her brown eyes looked older than he remembered. They fear me. You're not a bad person, he insisted. You've done some good things without needing credit for them. And you can do even more good if you join the HL. She snorted. I think you've been knocked around too many times, and you might have some brain damage. After their mom died and they had nowhere to go, the VA gave them a home and a community. They gave Catherine a job and made it possible for them to stay together. Catherine became Copycat, one of the most well-known villains in the world, and the rest was history. Catherine was loyal to the VA and wouldn't leave when given a choice. He couldn't get her to join the HL. She couldn't get him to leave. They were at an impasse. I know you don't agree with this, he said. But I have to do this. This is what I was meant to be. This is my purpose. She stared into his eyes, taking in his words. Finally she deflated, giving in. I know I can't change your mind, you have that wild stubbornness, she remarked. I'm still unhappy, but this is your decision to make. I will just have to learn to be okay with this. That was as supportive as she was ever going to get. He smiled. I'm just glad you're not locking me away in a cell till I changed my mind. I won't say I didn't consider it. Then she added, do I have to warn you about all the dangers that come with being a hero? Alex already did that. Alex knew. Her eyebrows raised. When? A few weeks ago, he replied. It wasn't on purpose. He knocked me down with a magnetic propulsion gun. It was a new toy by Dr. Downfall. He didn't tell me anything. I should give him a call. He winced. Don't hurt him. Only as much as he deserves. Her eyes narrowed at him. And don't think I'm not upset about you keeping secrets from me. I know. He went to the suit and placed it back in its metal case. He slid it underneath his bed. He should really find a better hiding spot soon. That was two people now that knew his secret. Mr. Carlyle might confiscate his suit to teach him a lesson. He turned back to his sister. You said you were bringing Thanksgiving to me. Did you bring food? She pointed to the bags of takeout on his desk. Let's eat. You can tell me all the stupid things you've done as Electron. Electric, he corrected. She rolled her eyes.